Hello and welcome to Tattered Cover. We are continuing our virtual event series with an amazing author tonight. But before I get into that, I just want to thank you for joining Tattered Cover online with us tonight. We are 50 years old. This is our half-century celebration. It's due to authors like who are joining us tonight and readers like you out there who really just kept us going for 50 years. It's an amazing opportunity to be here with you tonight. So thank you for joining us. If you're in the Denver area, you may have noticed we have expanded. We moved our downtown location right across the street from where the Rockies play baseball. We just opened up a kids location out in Aurora. So if you're in Denver, please visit our new locations. If you're not in Denver, please check out tatteredcover.com/events. We have a lot of virtual events. Upcoming, we have Giles Milton next Tuesday, which is going to be right in the middle of the day. So if you need a lunchtime break, please check that out. And tonight, if you need closed captioning, at the bottom of your screen, there should be a black bar. There's a button that says CC. That is closed captioning for those who want or need it. We have closed captioning available. Tonight, I am so excited to introduce an author who first came to Tattered Cover in 1995, and I'm sure she'll talk about it, but we have had a long relationship with Elinor Lipman. She is in conversation tonight to talk about her new book, Rachel to the Rescue. She is with Caroline Leavitt. Let me tell you a little bit about our authors first. Elinor Lipman was born in Massachusetts and is the author of 13 novels, including Good Riddance, On Turpentine Lane, and The Inn at Lake Divine. She has one essay collection, I Can't Complain, and Tweetland of Liberty, Irreverent Rhymes from Political Circus. Her first novel, Then She Found Me, was published in 1990, which, side note, was when I was 1 year old. So I have been reading Elinor Lipman, or my mom has, my entire life. And I probably found her when I was a little older, not 1 year old. That was turned into a film starring Helen Hunt, Bette Midler, and Colin Firth. She won the New England Book Award in 2001, and her novel, My Latest Grievance, won the Patterson Fiction Prize. Her essays and reviews have appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, and she currently lives in Manhattan as well as upstate New York. We also have Caroline Leavitt. She is the New York Times bestselling author of Pictures of You, Is This Tomorrow, Cruel Beautiful World, and 9 other novels, including her latest, which is the Good Morning America online pick, With or Without You. It is out now in paperback. She is a New York Foundation of the Arts Fellow in Fiction. She was also a finalist in the Sundance Screenwriters Lab and was longlisted for the Maine Readers Prize. She is the co-creator of A Mighty Blaze, which is an initiative supporting writers and indie bookstores during the pandemic, which we obviously love here at Tattered Cover. She also runs a blog for Psychology Today called Runs in the Family and teaches writing at the UCLA Writers Program extension. Her work has appeared in Modern Love, in the New York Times, New York Magazine, the Daily Beast, Salon, LitHub, and more. Please give me a huge virtual welcome for these two literary legends, Elinor Lipman and Caroline Leavitt. Welcome so much.
Thank you, Adam.
Honestly, you are.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. I actually, Elinor Lipman and I go back a long, long time, right when AOL started. And I remember it started and I was looking through saying, I wonder if there are other writers online. And I was so excited when I found Ellie's name. And so I decided to be really brave and rather than stalk her, to email her. And I did. And to my shock, she answered me and we went back and forth and we've become friends and it's lasted all these years. So I'm just so happy to be interviewing you, Ellie, especially about this particular book.
Oh, thank you. No, you were my first choice, and you said yes in about 10 seconds. And I love doing this with you. And yes, I mean, that AOL business, your son just turned 25. You were long before you ever had that boy. So I think this goes back about 30 years.
Yeah, maybe even more, So I want to talk about your book because I really feel like this is the book that we all need to be reading now. Rachel to the Rescue. It's about Rachel Klein, fired from her White House job after criticizing Donald Trump. I'm sorry, I just keep laughing every time I read that. As she leaves, she's hit by a speeding car driven by a paramour of the president himself, who's an optometrist. Meanwhile, Rachel's working for a hilariously muckraking journalist intent on bringing down the president. This is full of Ellie's trademarks, wry humor, lots of delicious food, friends, family. I just want to read some of the praise here. New York Times Book Review said, readers who are hungry for heartwarming comedy and spicy DC gossip will find Lipman's novel absolutely delicious. That's true. Minneapolis Star Tribune says, hilarious, a great novel for a long and lazy summer afternoon. It feels good to laugh. That's why this is the book we all should be reading now. And let's see, I said it's the perfect anti-Trump pro-voting book, again, that you absolutely need right now. So let's start the questions. So Ellie, I always want to know, like, what makes a writer start to write a particular book? Rachel is political satire, but it's also, that word again, delicious. You've long been political with these hilarious tweets that came into a book, and now you have this novel. But so what I want to know is, you ran with this genius idea. Can you tell us about the process and how it got published? Because it's sort of a story, a tale of two publishers.
Well, I'll start with, why I would ever write a book with Donald Trump in it. And of course, it's fiction. Haven't heard from him yet. I am, politically obsessed. I start watching the news at 6 a.m. and I subscribe to the New York Times and the Washington Post. And for some reason, because I think, Donald Trump took up space in my head, rent-free. I knew that I was going to write a novel where the character got fired from the White House. And I didn't know what her job had been. And I came up with a couple of two lame ideas first. One was that she might have had some kind of kitchen nutritionist Melania job where, of course, Melania would have a special chef and a special diet. And I even got a copy of something called the White House Chef's Cookbook, which I still have, has some good recipes in it. And then I had another really bad idea, which was she was something like a tutor for Barron, which, you're not supposed to mention his name, and you're supposed to be really delicate about the president's children. But one morning, because I would read Politico Playbook every day, I saw this piece, true, that it was about a man or two who left an office called, it was White House Office of Records Management, acronym WORM for in real life, true, where all they did was tape back together what Donald Trump ripped up. So everything, memos, letters, documents, anything. He just couldn't help himself. And that's what they did. So I said, Eureka, this is the job my character got fired from. And then, because I don't outline, I just had to take it one page at a time. And the first chapter, she leaves, not that we're going to go through chapter by chapter here, but she leaves the White House. And I thought, well, she's going to be sort of staggering out there. So I have her get hit by a car. And as far as the publishing, England stepped in. I slipped it to my English editor, knowing, they invented the Donald Trump balloon. And remember that over London. And he read it right away. He read it in a day and said, I want to publish this right now. So it came out first in England. And then my longtime publisher, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt at HarperCollins, came through, and they published the American paperback, which is the fiction original here, in July. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, I think you did. I think you did. So I wanted to know, I think the book is so delightfully satirical about Trump. He really comes across as kind of a buffoon. Um, did you ever think that you might be offending readers who actually like
Oh,
him?
never. Oh, well, let me put it this way. I was sort of deaf and blind to, I didn't want to think about that. I thought, well, I know my readers and they like my poems, which are written, from the point of view of Donald Trump. And so I felt that I was pretty safe. And I also had imagined for COVID, sort of a reading where someone, they would first go through the metal detector at any bookstore for any reading I might have to do, and over this, and would say, you horse's ass, how could you do this to the country? And I would have an answer about how we simply clearly, had a different heart and a different brain and a different set of ethics. So I had this little speech ready that I haven't had to give.
Oh, that's great. That's really great. Were you ever trolled on Twitter for any of this, for your tweets?
No.
Really?
I would say, no, not about this. No, the answer is no.
Well, would you like some of my trolls? That's amazing. That's
I'll
really,
write them
really
back
amazing.
about my heart and my brain and my ethics. I'll take care of that.
Okay, so I really want to know about your research, and what shocked you the most. Did you have sources in the White House itself?
Okay. I had a sort of source because I put Melania in a car and she drives, she's fictional Melania, certainly not the real Melania, but
Right.
the fictional one had kind of had it. So I wanted to put her in a car and have her drive from Washington to Trump Tower, maybe Trump Tower. So I called the Secret Service because I wanted to get the facts right. And I left a message and I, told you left my name and my phone number so they knew it wasn't a crank call. They could trust me. And some very nice man called back and he said he couldn't, of course, give me details of how they protect her because what if in fact I were an assassin. He didn't say that much. So he said, but if I watched the movie Guarding Tess with Shirley MacLaine and Nicolas Cage, I would get a very good, pretty accurate idea of the protecting Melania. So I watched that right away. And that was it. And very luckily, I have her stop at the Joseph R. Biden Jr. Comfort Center, Welcome Center, along, in Delaware on 95. And at the time, I don't want to say I was prescient or anything, but at the time, he was just one of many candidates. But I myself had stopped there on the way back from Gaithersburg to pee there. So why not?
That is wonderful. There's a whole lot of really delightful little side characters in here and in delightful little places that I want to talk about. Even the names are sort of adorable, like Klein Wallpaper and Paint. And there's also, I want to talk about Dougie the publicist, the PR firm with the great name Way with an exclamation point, which is that's a professional name or name. So I want to know where all these places came from. Are they based on real life or are they just based on imagination?
No, all made up. Dougie, the publicist, was, easy, sort of an exaggerated version of a guy who's too full of himself. All he cares about is, big names and his view of, brand. Get the brand. You need a brand. So that was fun doing Dougie. And the way I write, when she gets hit by a car, she ends up in the hospital. Her parents, Kleins of Klein Wallpaper and Paint, came down to Washington, frantic to take care of her, and so on the ride back, because they insist on taking her back to New York where they can take care of her, they mentioned Dougie as someone who might be able to help. And at the time, considering the way I do things and don't outline, I thought maybe this Dougie was going to be a love interest. But as soon as she met him, I said, no, no way, no way. She goes to the office and, no.
I just want to stop you there because you said something really interesting about your way of writing. You said, as soon as she met him, I said, no. So it was a surprise to you. You might have had an intention that maybe this could be a certain way, but as you were writing it, it sort of veered in another direction. Does that happen all the time for you?
It does. It does. And, I got sort of licensed to do this because I was watching 30, no, I don't know how many years ago, 40 years ago, the Dick Cavett show. And he had Doctorow on for ragtime. And Doctorow, he said to Cavett, asked Doctorow, now you have Emma Goldman in there and you have Houdini. What made you decide to put them in there? And he said, oh, well, my character was just sitting in his apartment, and there was a knock at the door. And he went to answer the door, and it was Houdini, or it was Emma Goldman. And I was just starting writing then, and I thought, well, that's good, because that's how I so that's okay. So I write by the seat of my pants, but I think I'm very good at recognizing when I'm going off the path and then bring myself back on. Cut. I cut a ton.
That's totally interesting. And I just love the way you expressed it. So I also want to talk about food. I know from you that you are an exquisite cook. Jeff and I believe a very young Max, had dinner at your house in Northampton once. It was totally delicious and lovely. So I want to talk about Rachel's hosting all these really important dinners. First, how much fun was that to write? How did you think of the menu? And
well, in both cases, she was a little bit reluctant because she sort of got talked into doing Thanksgiving. And it was, oh no, because, she had just started dating someone and her roommates talked her into inviting him. And then why not ask your parents? And then it was, oh no, well, she didn't want to go to New York, so invite her parents and they would meet the possible boyfriend for the first time. And then the aforementioned Kirby Champion, her boss, who's not very talented and tries really hard, but a big buffoon, he kind of invites himself. So it was, planning a reluctant meal. And her roommate, Yasmin, is a great cook and also very nurturing and adds, warmth to what had been kind of a chilly house. And then the Seder, she also got sort of talked into a Seder. And Yasmin, who isn't Jewish, found Ramadan recipes that fit, like chicken with apricots.
That sounds so delicious, by the way.
It's a recipe.
It sounds delicious even for a vegetarian.
It's a recipe on the New York Times. It's got chickpeas in it. I made it. Not so great.
Really?
Yeah, not so great.
That's the difference between reality and fiction.
Yeah.
Fiction is always delicious. Right, it's always delicious. But
because it looked all beige. By the time it was cooked, it was like one big beige pot.
Oh, that's so disappointing. That's so disappointing. But I want to talk a little bit more about that because you talked about food and nurturing. And there are so many lovely relationships in this book. Especially with Rachel, who she sort of really finds herself and finds her happiness at the end. So you had mentioned something the last time we were talking where you said that your people have said to you that your default is always happy. And I thought that was charming because my default is always extreme anxiety. So I want to know if you can talk to us about how you got to that default.
Oh, that was said to me by a very dear friend because my husband died. Now it's almost 12 years ago. And he had been sick for quite a while. And so after he died, I was saying that I felt guilty about feeling, he had frontotemporal dementia, that I felt guilty because, I was feeling a relief. And also just in conversation with her, I was my usual self. And she said, look, at your default setting is cheerful, so don't feel bad about it. I don't know. It's one of those just, ingrained things. I did come from a very functional family, and my parents both had very good senses of humor and were good audiences. And, does that answer?
Well, it's great. And readers really respond to it. So let's talk about Kirby Champion. He's the muckraker who's like just so much fun to read about. And he just sees Rachel's situation as a big plus for him because he really wants to get the screws in. So was he based on a real life biographer, or did you speak to biographers to find out how they work?
He wasn't, but I can tell you what sort of, gave me the idea. It wasn't that, I respect Michael Wolff. I bought 2 of his books about Trump, but some of the criticism about him, I think unfair, was about maybe, his sources. Of course they were, the alleged sources at the White House. They were going to come back and say, no, I didn't say that, all that stuff. But just the idea that, there could be that level of someone who wasn't quite up to stuff. Not saying that about Michael Wolff. So I just thought it would be so easy to find someone like Kirby Champion who was lazy and, cobbled together quotes from other people and from other sources. And that he hired Rachel. He loved the idea that she'd been fired from the White House because he thought she might have a chip on her shoulder, and that would be very good help with his upcoming book about Trump called The Blight.
That's hilarious. So since the book was finished, there's been a lot of stuff in the news about Andrew Cuomo, and he's a cameo in your book. So I want you to just talk about if you had second thoughts about keeping him in, or what you think about the scandal.
Well, I won't tell you what I think about this scandal because, oh my God, all you have to do is read the New York Times. But what happened, I don't want this to be a huge reveal, but let me put it this way. During my isolation and my, hibernation, then I would set my alarm on my phone for 11:25 every morning, so I wouldn't miss Andrew Cuomo's press conference, where he would talk about how many people were still sick and percentages and how many people of our fellow New Yorkers died. And it was like it was like my rabbi. It was like I went to services every day. And one day I heard him say that he was authorizing remote marriage, people could marry, ministers, rabbis, imams, you name it, could, judges, people, private citizens could marry people by Zoom. And then he said, or me. So a couple of weeks later, I had the idea that because there was a wedding in the book, that somebody could arrange as a surprise for a native New Yorker, for Andrew Cuomo to officiate. And I wouldn't change it, only like one Republican friend who's a lawyer wrote and said, this was probably 6 months ago. He said, by July, he's going to be in big trouble because of the nursing homes. And your readers are going to be people whose parents died in nursing homes. And I wrote back and said, it was a moment in time when my character, it was a moment in time. And I just owe that to what? To history, to just the timing, and proof my friend across the street, his 90-year-old Republican mother in Texas, tuned in every day to get, what Andrew Cuomo was saying about, as New York goes, so goes the nation, because it started as the hot spot. So no, if my made me do it. Oh, and I sent the pages. This was before he was in trouble. I Xeroxed the pages from the galley and sent it to him. And I got a lovely, lovely note that he said, and I said, sorry, I put words in your mouth. I hope you forgive me for putting words in your mouth, because I gave him dialogue, and brought in Matilda saying she wished, she'd always wanted one of her sons to be a priest. And this was close. And he wrote back this, or, maybe an aide ghost writes the notes, but it was completely lovely about how he was honored
That's
to be a
lovely.
character in my novel.
That's totally lovely. I want to remind everybody out there listening that you can order Elinor's books at Tattered Cover and support a great bookstore. And also, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. So I want to talk about that time again, that one moment. You wrote this novel prior to Trump's election loss. And yes, he did lose. Do you think that his post-election claims of widespread fraud put your novel in a different light than it might have had before the election? I wanted to add, do you think for a moment anybody actually would have an affair with him?
No.
Sorry, I had to ask.
It's fiction. Very good question. Well, some of those ladies did in the past. I think some people would. Okay, so here's my feeling about this. I like to say Donald Trump does appear, he has a few lines when he's in the book on Tucker Carlson's show. But what I like to say that, it's very much like a Lipman book with its, a romantic comedy, and, it's about family. You've said this very nicely about family, and I think that the rescue, Rachel to the rescue, is her, well, besides rescuing Kirby Champion for making a fool of himself, it's really about rescuing herself and finding happiness and her roommates. And so, but I understand why people like the Trump is in, flashing neon letters.
All right, I have another question for you before we'll take questions from the audience, which is, you have said that actually not you, Robert Stone said that the purpose of the novel is to make reader feel less lonely. And you want your readers to be buoyed by your books, to laugh and feel satisfying. But I want to know, does it make you feel less lonely to write the books, and do your characters stay alive for you long after you've finished one book and you're on to another? Do you think about them?
Sweet question. Yes, I heard him personally in San Antonio, I think it was. And the question put to us on a panel was, the purpose of the novel. And people had this grand, eloquent, long answers. And he said he felt the purpose of the novel was to make the reader feel less lonely. I feel less, let's see, when I'm done, there's been a couple of times where a friend recognized, because I was whining about it's Christmas and this was a long time ago and everyone's on vacation, and you'd think all editors and agents worked as department store Santas, nobody's there, they get 2 weeks off. And she said, she was from India, she had this lovely accent. She said, Ellie, you're sounding a little bratty. So I said, oh, I try not to be. And she said that she thought maybe I was lonely, that I missed my characters. So that was with Isabel's Bed, where I'd been on a dune in Truro, Massachusetts with them. And similarly, I felt the same way after my latest grievance, which, one of the big things where they were marooned in the big blizzard of 76. So, yeah, but then I started a new book.
Right, right. And you have a whole new cast of characters. We have a question from
good.
Ty. You mentioned guarding Tess. Are there other movies you've used for inspiration and research?
Oh, oh, um, well, interesting, I think. I think this is interesting. During COVID, I'm up here in a different place, not in my New York apartment. I've been binging on English police procedurals, and
Oh,
I can't get enough. And I watch one and I watch the whole 6 seasons. And the book I'm writing now, my character, even though she's nothing to do, she has been, because she's on house arrest, I should add. She's on house arrest. So she too has been binging on these. So every once in a while, she'll say solicitor instead of lawyer. And she talks about, I'll ask you this question without fear or favor. And she adopts some of the language and I really enjoyed doing that. So not a movie, but that's about as close as I can come up with right now.
okay. Okay, that sounds like a great book. I love the whole idea of house arrest. There's something so interesting, especially like after the pandemic, which is sort of a house arrest. It's very applicable to today.
It is. I'm using, that I have experience. Food gets sent in and you can't, first of all, you can't go out and buy a dress, but second of all, what do you need a dress for?
Right.
Yeah.
You have a question from Anna. Since you wrote during the pandemic, did you see your story or characters growing more quickly compared to previous books? So that's an interesting question.
It is. I was trying, first of all, I was trying hard to make a self-imposed deadline of something like, I think, the end of May. And I was writing more because I still here will say to Jonathan, the lovely partner, what day is it? And so when you don't know quite what day it is, then it's much easier to write 7 days a week. I used to write 5 days a week and then come up here for the weekend. So yes, I would say much more productive during then and now.
Okay, do we have another question? Oh, yes, we do. This is from John, for both me and for you. Thank you, John. What do you know now that you wish you knew when you were writing your first book?
You go first, Caroline.
Me? Okay, what do I wish I knew? I wish
tell them how many novels you've written.
I'm on 13 now. 13. What do I wish I knew? I wish I knew that that everything wasn't so fraught, that I could do this, that I couldn't, that just because somebody says don't do this doesn't mean I couldn't do it in a book. I wanted to have more agency, and I wish I had realized not to give up no matter what happened. What about you, Ellie?
One thing, I've learned a couple of things. One of the things is I now approach a chapter and I write this this chapter I don't like. And I say to myself, am I losing it? Do I not know how to write anymore? And now I realize I revise it and cut and paste and revise. And I get it to where I like it, where I feel I've polished it as much as I can. And it took a while to learn that, to not be horribly discretionary. So I think what I learned was to have faith in the process.
Right.
And the other thing I've learned is if it bothers you, if you trip over a sentence and you say, you sort of wrinkle your nose over it, fix it right there, because the second time you read it, it's going to bother you. And so one thing is saving time and kill your darlings and fix it now. Fix it. If it bothers you now, it's going to bother a reader.
That's right. That's a hard thing to do. That's a really, really hard thing to do. Has your process changed at all because of the pandemic? I mean, now with the book that you're writing now, do you feel dramatically changed or?
Well, someone asked me the other night if my writing has changed over the course of 13 novels, now my 14th, and I said, not really. I would say more writing, with each book, you want to be better. You want to be better.
Right.
So here I am writing the 14th, wanting it to be better, and, integrating a little more of real life in the sense of COVID meets house arrest.
Okay. While we're waiting for another question, whoops. I just really wanted you to tell your origin story. You have a really interesting story of how you became a writer. You had other careers before you became a writer. And if I remember correctly, you took a writing class. And
I did. I worked at my courage. Let's see, how much time we have time.
We have plenty of time.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, because I want to tell my tattered cover related to Rachel to the Rescue. I'll answer Caroline's and then I'll tell my tattered cover story. Yes, I was working for the Mass Teachers Association, NEA, and I was doing their magazine and newspaper. And I bravely signed up for a 10-week writing course at Brandeis Adult Ed. And I was really kind of chicken. First of all, I had to drive from Newton to Waltham and find a parking space, but it was also $40. It cost me $40 to take that course. So I went, and it was supposed to be for beginners, and they'd start with exercises, and everyone else seemed as if they'd written something, and long after other people had dropped the assignments and were bringing fictions, as the teacher called it. I finally wrote a story, and he read it to the class. He read everyone's to the class, and they laughed. And it was like, the what is it? The thrill of the grease paint, the smell of the grease paint, the roar of the grease paint, the smell of the crowd. I was intoxicated that people had laughed. So that I went home, and I remember I threw myself against the front door, and I slipped down to the ground and said to my husband, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, which, for anyone who's ever taken a writing course, we know that just because you workshop something and it went over, it doesn't mean it's going to be your career. But that happened. But I have to may I tell my tattered cover story?
Oh, sure, go ahead. You do have one more question, but tell your tattered.
Oh, do the question, because we're fine.
Okay, this is from Anne. You indicated that you write by the seat of your pants without an outline. When you start a novel, do you have a pretty clear idea of how the story will play out, or I'm going to add, or end?
No, but I do know that it's a Lipman novel. So it's going to have a happy ending, because my feeling is, I'm the god of this world. I'm not going to, let people just stand at the edge of the abyss and wonder, what's going to happen to them. So, and I might even march them down the aisle. That's not unheard of. Yeah, so about 2/3 of the way through, I think, okay, these are the balls I threw up in the air. And now I have to bring them down, and bring them down well, so they don't just land with a thud. So that becomes a little, when I make notes, and it's like, deal with Anne. I'm making these names up, deal with Anne, deal with Charles, deal with that, figure out about Jane. And so that's as close as I get to an outline.
Can you tell your tattered cover story?
I will. Well, when I was there in, I think it was 1993, because I was on tour with Pam Houston, and she was the big star. She just had Cowboys of My Weakness released, and everywhere we went, I was not even the co-star. I used to stand there when people asked her question after question, and say to myself, it was during the Clinton administration, and I'd say to myself, remember Al Gore, he doesn't whine, he's the vice president. So anyway, but we went to tattered cover, and I read from the Wayman Act, and Pam read, and then a couple of weeks, I don't know how much longer, I'd heard that there had been a librarian conference in Denver, and one of the librarians present had gone back and said to a Massachusetts librarian that she had been really struck by my chapter, my writing. So he went back to where in Danvers, no, I forget where he lived. In Massachusetts, where he was a librarian, and then he was a librarian at MIT, and then he became a big librarian at New York Public Library. And now, oh, I should say, first time I met him, he showed up at a Framingham Borders with every one of my books, hardcover for me to sign. And then we were in touch ever since. And he became appointed by Obama the archivist of the United States. And he's thanked in the acknowledgements because he was the one, when I called him to ask about WORM, White House Office of Records Management, he told me where it was and what the office looked like and, you know, what street my character would have to cross to be hit by a car on. And I asked his permission if I could thank him by name in the acknowledgements or whether I'd be giving him away. And so I thanked him for, you know.
That's lovely.
But wouldn't have ever met him if it hadn't been for the tattered cover.
That is just lovely. I love that story. That's completely wonderful. I don't think we have any other questions.
Yeah, even though we're virtual, the audience is still shy, I've discovered. We got a lot of thank yous, a lot of thank you for both of you. I'll ask one final question. Do you remember a book from maybe your childhood or even early adults that was like, wow, this book, I want to write books like this? Do you remember what there's one that stands out?
Go ahead, Ellie.
Oh, I read Daddy Longlegs by Jean Webster, which was an epistolary novel and had one of my favorite themes. She was an orphan and she outgrew the orphanage, and a trustee secretly sent her to a thinly veiled Vassar, not named. I read that book from the time I was about 12 years old, all through high school. I own a copy now, and I still love epistolary novels. In fact, I have to plug one now. That this past summer, I read a book by Patty Dan called The Right Sister, and it's epistolary. It's letters and diaries of the Orville and Melville Wright's sister. Okay, a little pitch there. So Caroline. Oh,
well, I was a very weird kid. I was a very strange kid. My father gave me this book called Hatter's Castle by A.J. Cronin, and I just loved it. It was so dramatic, and the people were so evil, and people were dying and having tragedies. And I actually recently reread the book, and it's so melodramatic and terrible that you wouldn't want to read it now. But when I read it back then, I thought, wow, this is something you can do in fiction. You can make people feel and do these things and have things come out. And I just always remembered that. And that was for the point where I thought, I have to do this. I have to do this.
And, you know, in more closer to my writing, at a certain point, right before I started writing, which I think inspired me, I read Happy All the Time by Laurie Colwin.
Right.
I got it out of the library. I loved it so much that I then bought it, read over again. And what it seemed to me, it's still, you know, the epitome of romantic comedy that's really intelligent. And, you know, everything about the writing is wonderful. The wit is wonderful. And, you know, I'd hope to get a blurb from Laurie Cole.
She lived 2 blocks away from me, and I never saw her. I used to walk past her apartment in New York, up and down, hoping she would come out, and she never did.
Oh, so that's our literary histories.
Yes, thank you both so much. This meant so much to Tattered Cover. We're so excited to have, like I said at the beginning, 2 literary legends here with us virtually.
Say hi to your mom for me.
Oh, I will. I think she actually came. I sent her the link, and this is the only event she's ever been excited that I have hosted.
Oh, Mom,
so Linda, if you're out there, hi. Well, I'll call you later.
And Caroline's book is just out in paperback.
Yes,
I think we said that. Yeah.
And I put the links. I just want everyone out there in the audience, I put links to Caroline's most recent book and Elinor's most recent book. You can find them all at tatteredcover.com. And Elinor, Caroline, where can we find you on the internet?
Oh, well, you know, the Instagram and Twitter and just my name and my, just my name for my website. And maybe you'll put the recommendation on the book, The Right, WR, The Right Sister by Patty Dan, paperback, just wonderful.
That's so nice of you, Ellie.
Oh, no, I loved it so much that I talk it up whenever I can.
Definitely. I will put that in the link right now for everyone. And Caroline, where can we find you on the internet?
Oh, I'm everywhere. I'm such a social media person. I'm on Facebook on my name. I'm on Twitter all the time on at Levitt Novelist, and you can probably see some of the trolls that do occasionally come after me. I'm also on Instagram as Caroline Levitt, and I'm just there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much,
Thank
both
you,
of you.
Adam.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for inviting me, Ellie and Adam. I'm thrilled to be a Tattered Cover.
Okay, see you soon.
Pleasure. Everyone have a great evening. Thank you for joining Tattered Cover. Visit us at tatteredcover.com.
So welcome. Good night. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. We are no longer